We can't say the future without AI. I mean, there's no way around it. 50% of workers now believe AI is going to improve their experience. When I come into the meeting room, I need a way to incorporate my AI with what's going on in the meeting. It's almost a bring your own AI type of a concept. Most of what we do in our day-to-day is going to change significantly.
Hear the latest AV trends and predictions in this episode of Crestron's Smarter Spaces podcast on your preferred podcast platform.
You know, major websites over the past couple of years, they won't even let you use simple passwords anymore on most financial websites and banks and stuff like that. So for the technology and electronic products, it shouldn't be very difficult for them.
That's why I just use admin $123 gets everything through.
Right.
It's perfect.
What's your password?
Password.
No, what is your password?
Password, the word spelled out password.
You're the head of security and your password is password?
I don't feel good about it either.
On this episode of ResiWeek, we talk AOC cables, tech and design showrooms, UK cybersecurity, and a whole lot more on this episode of ResiWeek. This is ResiWeek, episode 434, Cables Not Congresswomen. Welcome to this episode of ResiWeek. This is your weekly roundup of all the latest news and stories for the residential AV industry. I'm your host, Matty Scott for AVNation.tv, and this week I'm pleased to be joined by two of my good friends. First, we have Arlen Schweiger. He's the editor-in-chief over at CE Pro. How you doing, Arlen?
I'm doing great, Matt. Thank you very much for having me on ResiWeek again.
Always, as I take credit for booking guests that I don't ever book. Thanks, Mitchell.
Thanks, Mitchell.
Exactly. We have Ian Bryant. He's an AV programmer for IES Communications. How you doing, Ian?
Doing great, Matt. It is awesome to be back. Thanks for having me.
Hey, thank you for being here. All right, gentlemen, we are going to kick this off with a story that comes to us from CE Pro. Better active optical cable products are finally coming to the market. The concerns surrounding the performance and validity of AOC, not the Congresswoman from New York, but the aforementioned active optical cable device has prompted manufacturers to improve some of the flaws on these products. Arlen, let me start with you. As always, go read through the article. It covers some of the really important stuff going with this. What is it going to take, given the fact that a lot of integrators have been on the fence, we'll say, about using this type of cable, typically for their HDMI installations? What is it going to take to get integrators to actually entertain the option of using an AOC cable over the balance or the network interfaces that they have been using in the past to garner the required links once you get past a standard HDMI length? Right.
Well, it's got to be reliability, right? And that ability to run long distance, like you just mentioned. We have Jeff Boccaccio of DPL Labs. He's been writing this column for us for, 12 or 13 years now. And I've been the lucky person to edit it for 12 or 13 years now. And it's been a long time that he's been talking about active optical cables and how they've kind of been behind a bit when it comes to the HDMI front. Mm-hmm. But now, the products are getting better. They're able to go the distance. They have the bandwidth. And so it's just a matter of not having those flaws that they've been having over the years. And like I said, Jeff's been writing about them over the years. And it seems to be much better news that he's writing about these days than in the past few years, for sure.
That's a good point. Ian, when you see this, I love the concept that manufacturers are listening to integrators, but I question if that's actually what's happening here, or if the manufacturers of these cables, if they are fighting for relevancy. Because I think due to the aforementioned, flaws and some of the issues that were prevalent in AOC cables, that's what caused the move to the Balun base or the AV over IP base. Which one is it? Is it trying to maintain some level of relevancy, or is it, hey, we're listening to what integrators are saying, the feedback we're getting, and we're trying to get the better product?
I personally think that it's a fight to push back against the AV over IP market. The majority of distribution systems, whether they be residential or commercial, these days are switching over to almost complete AV over IP, which once you get into that market, it's almost, your copper at your local level and your fiber and AOC at your head end distribution level. The AOC HDMI to HDMI is not used as much anymore. It's in very small situations, and so I think there's some need for it. Not all projects are going to do full on video distribution, and when you get into the higher resolutions and needing the higher bandwidth over longer distances, it's definitely a use case. But I definitely see the majority of at least the larger systems in the luxury market and in the commercial market are switching over to that AV over IP distribution, which is going all fiber anyway. So I don't know. I think it could be a little bit of both.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right,
This is Erin Marmoran of EdTech. The world of higher ed AV is growing rapidly. That's why each month we hear from the best and brightest from colleges and universities all over the U.S. Check out EdTech on AVNation.tv or wherever you get your favorite podcasts.
let's change topics for a second. This comes to us from Residential Systems, making tech and design relatable through showrooms, from a good friend of the show, Katie McGregor Bennett. Homeowners, property managers, and design build professionals are finding great value in seeing tech in design forward environments that illustrate what's possible. Katie was over in Bozeman at a Savvy Digital Environments showroom in downtown Bozeman that's co-located with an architectural firm and an art gallery. They use the facility for events and a combination of tech and design, and they're able to do a lot of demo things in there as far as showcasing the technology that's available with everything from Ketra to shades and screens to some cool products from Leon and invisible speakers in the wall, etc. Ian, when you see this, when you follow this, I love the concept of high-end design showrooms, right? But I'm aware of the fact that most integrators that make up, the CEDIA community are significantly smaller shops than Savvy AV. So are these showrooms really just available or possible for those handful of large integrators in our industry, and kind of unattainable at any level for your everyday integrator?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I don't think that it's unattainable for the only, the integrators the size of SAV. I mean, SAV is giant.
Mm-hmm.
They dominate that market up there, and it is a very luxury market. But there are other, I think it depends on where you're located in the country, where you are in a city. For instance, Premier Systems out of Carmel, Indiana, good friends with them over there. They have a office with a small showroom on one side of town, and then they have a small office that's in a design center in Carmel, downtown Carmel, and it really works great for them. And they're, I'd say they're on the larger side, but they're not the size of, say, SAV or some of the bigger integrators that lead that area. But I think it really depends on what works in your market and the relationship you have with the design and build community. Some integrators just don't have that one-on-one connection with the local designers and architects in their community. If they do, then finding something that can work out. It doesn't have to be building a showroom inside of a design center. It could be helping coordinate events with your design build, doing CD outreach, COI programs. So CD has a great program to support education to the design build community with lots of classes, and they facilitate a lot of content and education. But it's tough. I know a lot of times when I'm on the show, I answer a lot of my questions with, well, what works for you? And it really is that kind of thing. Sometimes it's also testing the market. If it doesn't feel like the investment up front is paying off, then, shift your strategy. But And some of the really large ones, when you've got the design, if you've got interior designers and architects that are really pushing technology in their designs forward and center, I definitely think it's a great one. But if they're not, as you mentioned earlier in the show, some of the design build people are just still not putting the effort into integrating technology into their home designs. They're not wanting to complicate the process. They feel that it is a cog in the wheel, but then there are others that are pushing forward and seeing the value and the benefit. So it all depends.
I like it. Arlen, when you see this, if you don't have the relationship with the design build community, should that be something that limits or affects your approach as an integrator to the design room or the design side?
Well, I feel like integrators, they need to cultivate this relationship with the design build community. It's one thing that we've been talking about for a while now. When you're talking about relationships where it can get integrators into a project earlier, they need something like that. Referrals that can get them into an area, like Ian was talking about with the luxury market. When you're talking about those kind of customers, you are probably going to be talking to their architects or interior designers and all that going on. So, I think it would behoove integrators to facilitate these relationships. Absolutely.
That's a good point. All right, let's move on to our next story. This comes from CE Pro. Excuse me, as I'm reading the byline. Inside the UK's new smart home cybersecurity law, the UK has become the first country in the world to introduce stricter security standards for consumer IoT devices. In a landmark move, they have, as we said, introduced stricter security standards that essentially mean you cannot use a manufacturer who's doing business in the UK cannot use a generic, admin or 12345 password, but you have to use something it's a little bit more complex, and you need to prompt the users to change that upon installation. Arlen, when you see this, I think this is a fantastic first step. I'm amazed at how long it took to get to this first step and how simplistic this step is, but it's great nonetheless. What is this going to mean for manufacturers that are doing business in the UK? And do you think this will have quick trickle-down effect into the North American market or the greater Europe market?
Yeah, I certainly hope it does. It would seem that it is a very explicit call to action of being, regulated for the manufacturers over there to implement these kind of things. So it'll be interesting to see how the results of this kind of pay off over there. I'm really interested in how they're planning on regulating this and making sure that it's being followed. I'm not quite positive how they're going to enforce it, but I guess we'll see about that. But yeah, you would hope that the manufacturers who work over there, if they see positive results stemming from this, then I think they will do everything they can to enhance their, cybersecurity measures here in North America as well, because they know it's practically the number one thing that consumers are concerned about with their systems. And that's something that they, certainly don't want to see anything compromised over here, because if something happens, a hack, think about that. The ramifications for the integrator might be one thing, but for the manufacturer, it could be huge. So I would say they're going to try and avoid that at all costs.
That's a great point. Ian, when you see this, when you follow this, we've talked a lot about the U.S. CyberMark stuff that's slowly starting to come down the pipe. What's the likelihood that a manufacturer that does business in the U.S., in Canada, in Mexico, in the UK is going to modify their business practices and how they handle security and access to their devices strictly for the UK market versus just rolling it out across their product line as a whole?
I would hope that they would roll out a full product suite wide. Any manufacturer, I would hope that. But if you look at what Apple did for their last rollout for the it was something in the App Store, the ability. It was just the UK, and they just separated it just for the UK audience, and they didn't give US, Canada, and the Americas the ability to do it. So, I think it's going to all depend on the manufacturer's budget and what they have to do that. But I think it's about time that we start holding some of the manufacturers accountable for not just the passwords. This talks about having making sure that the consumer knows that they need to set a password or use a harder password and set those guardrails. But we also need to keep in mind that there's manufacturers rolling out product that are using older versions of security protocols that need to be addressed, that are hackable. There was just, I think last year, there was a whole suite of manufacturers using old SSH protocols that had vulnerabilities, and they weren't updating them. So there's a lot more work that needs to be done in this area for the especially for the direct-to-consumer product line. For those that are the integrators that are implementing the products, we hope that they understand the industry-wide recommended practices of setting those harder passwords and keeping those passwords for the customer in a secure place, so they're not getting data breaches on their own network. Things are going to need to change. It's been a problem for a long time, but I think obviously with the UK rolling out these standards, usually the US is always to follow. When they did GDPR, the California passed the CCPA and the CPRA afterwards, and then now we've got the APRA that just passed this year. So hopefully the US will recognize what happened over there and start upgrading our own internal federal laws as well.
Do you think, just before we move on, do you think that the fact that in most cases this is strictly going to be a firmware thing, right? This is not hardware. This is just a little firmware rewrite. Do you think that will, again, make it more localized versus globally? Again, to use your Apple example?
Yeah, the password side of it is definitely a firmware and a software side. So it would be a firmware in the product and maybe a software update in the app, or however you use to set up the device. And it's going to be a much easier rollout for manufacturers. If it's more the security protocol side, that's going to be could be a hardware chipset, could be a firmware in there as well. But it should be pretty simple for them to do the upgrades. Obviously I say that, but I don't know what kind of budgets they have for software changes and firmware changes. Anyone in the integration industry knows how fast some of the manufacturers that we sell and install update their firmware, and how much they're making changes. So for some of the more direct to consumer products, you would hope that they would be able to roll this out pretty quick. It shouldn't be something difficult to do a pop-up window when you do an initial setup or a reminder to say, hey, you need to change this password. It's not meeting security protocol standards. Websites are, if you've set any passwords on any major websites over the past couple of years, they've come up and changed that algorithm quite differently. Recently, they won't even let you use simple passwords anymore on most financial websites and banks and stuff like that. So for the technology and electronic products, it shouldn't be very difficult for them.
That's why I just use $123 $. Gets everything through.
Right.
It's perfect. I don't use that. Nice try. All right, let's hit our last story of the day. This comes to us from Residential Systems. Josh releases new dealer sales tools, includes a new experimental video, as well as a one sheet and some updated client brochures, etc. Go read through it. It covers everything that they've brought out and what they're focused on. Arlen, when you see this, again, this is great that they're doing this. Is this a larger issue within the industry that manufacturers do not work hard enough, I'll just say it that way, in providing actual sales tools to dealers on their products and on their platforms?
I would wonder what your history and experience has been with that in this case, but because that answers it right there. No, I was going to say, we don't get a lot of stories about manufacturer tools. I'll just say that. We get some. They're obviously here and there, and a lot of companies are. It's not just manufacturers, but these days you have distributors who are putting together tools, even integrators that are putting together tools. Down here, Audio Advice in North Carolina has a home theater design tool. Whenever we talk to manufacturers on kind of like a one-to-one basis, what's going on with their company, trends they're seeing, we always ask them about what kind of dealer support they have. So I think some of it might not be as publicized with some of the companies. Like we just might not hear about some of the dealer tools they have, because I know talking to a lot of the companies, a lot of them sing the same song about, talking about trainings, talking about sales tools, sales and marketing, co-op dollars, things like that. So, I think overall maybe the experience is a bit above terrible. I'm hoping for people like you, Matt, but I'm sure there's room for more out there. From what we could tell, there's always going to be room out there for better resources for integrators.
Let's be honest. I would just be happy if every manufacturer had a spec sheet for every product they sold, like the projector I was trying to spec last week from a major 4-letter company that, for the love of God, didn't have one available for their new laser. It's awesome. Not helpful. But I digress. Ian, one of the interesting things that Alex said in one of the pull quotes from this was that the biggest challenges to smart home adoption is how complicated systems become as more devices are added to the mix. Well, I agree with what he's saying there. Isn't that the complete opposite of what an automation system is supposed to do? What am I supposed to do with that quote? Sorry, I'm not trying to set you up.
Setting me up to get in trouble with Alex.
Nor am I trying to pick on Alex. But this is a common issue.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely over the decades I've been programming on and off for over 20 years now, and different control systems, different everything. And there was a long period of time there for a while. The more you integrated, the more complex the control system tended to get. I think though in the past 5+ years, mainly really probably even the last 3 years, the control systems have really done a good job. The control system manufacturers have done a really good job at finding out how to keep things very simple. There's been a good understanding of utilizing different types of user interfaces to help simplify the process instead of having, a bunch of giant 15-inch touch panels or nothing but handheld remotes. There's been a lot of education around this. For me, when I read the article, the first thing that popped in my mind, seeing their video and seeing their big push as a unified control system of one, they want to be the only control system in a project, was that maybe the sales toolkit is to help push the strategy for their dealers to try to sell just Josh AI products and not Josh AI plus other control system manufacturers. So I think that it's more for them as a strategy to support this new initiative that they're trying to be the single system and some of their dealers' projects. But simplification of any control system is key, and doing it right, can be difficult. And especially you get in some of these larger jobs where you're integrating everything, it is easy to get out of control. So I see where they're coming from. They've always kept their products have always been about, and their platform has always been about trying to keep it simple and easy to use and intuitive. And so I understand what they're going for. But the other control system manufacturers are trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, that's a great point. All right, gentlemen, let's leave it there. Thank you both for joining us. Ian, if people want to connect with you, learn more about IES Communications, where can they do that?
You can get me on LinkedIn, just search for my name, or check out IES's website, IESComm with 2 M's, IESCOMM.com.
Excellent. Thank you, sir. Arlen, if people want to connect with you, learn more about CE Pro, where can they do that?
So they can go to cepro.com, and also they can connect with me on LinkedIn as well at Arlen Schweiger.
Excellent. Thank you both again for joining us. Thank you for joining us as well. If you'd like to connect with me, you can find me on Twitter at Matt D. Scott, or X, or whatever you want to call it, as well as every other social platform. But more importantly, please visit AVNation.tv, where you'll find this show as well as a wide variety of other shows with all the verticals that we cover. When you visit the website, please take a moment to check out our supporters. We are extremely thankful for their support and ask that you check them out as well. Thanks again for watching. That's all the time we have for this episode of ResiWeek,
the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AVNation.
This is AVNation.